Southgate Media Group's The Strain podcast. I'm your host, Blair Knight Graves from ShowRatings.tv, and with me today is Kyle Tremblay, who's also from ShowRatings.tv. You can find us on Twitter at BlairLivesTV and at KyleLivesTV. Blair spelled B-L-A-I-R-E, and if you've listened to our previous podcast, Monroe's Comfy Sweater, you'll know that Kyle is about to tease me about that. Hi, Kyle. How are you doing?
Hi, Blair with an E. Our previous podcast, by the way, for people who don't watch NBC every night like us, is about the show Grimm, which, as far as I can tell, is pretty much the same as The Strain, right?
Oh, here it goes. All right. So, this is our introductory episode of the podcast. Meet and greet. What Kyle has just revealed about himself is that he doesn't really care for sci-fi shows all that much, yet he finds himself...
Hold on. Wow. Right off the bat, attacking my character and my knowledge. It's not that I don't care for sci-fi shows, it's that I have very low tolerance for dumb sci-fi. And especially dumb self-serious sci-fi.
Yes.
This is where I would... The Walking Dead. Shows of that nature.
Okay.
I do like sci-fi as a concept, and I do like Grimm, I should say. I just don't. I don't have much patience for these world-building shows that I think some of them are kind of dumb. So.
Well, if you're interested in world building, you should get ready for the Strain.
Yeah, absolutely. This is based on the few previews that I've looked at. This looks like a whole thing. This is a big deal, right?
This is a really big deal, and so here's going to be the major difference between Kyle and I. I mean, obviously, as he just said, he has a pretty low threshold for.
I'm a boy and you're a girl.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to get that basic. Okay. And furthermore, the difference between this podcast and other podcasts that we've done before together is that I have read the book series, The Strain, and am a Guillermo del Toro superfan. And you have not read the books.
No.
You have a low threshold for this genre.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you and I fight a lot about Guillermo del Toro.
We do. Long on the record fights about Guillermo del Toro. I assume all of our phone calls are on the record. Yeah. So I mean, this is we wanted to talk about this show because we're coming at it from such different perspectives. You being someone who is very familiar with the source material, and who is I imagine super psyched about it being made into a TV show, and I am also super psyched about this TV show, but for entirely superficial reasons. Just because it looks good. And because I am desperate for a good horror show, which I can't recall ever since, I don't know, Twin Peaks, a good horror TV show, a scary, good TV show. I mean,
are you forgetting Hannibal?
Is Hannibal a horror show? I mean, Hannibal is Hannibal. it's its own thing, but the previous season finale certainly played out like a horror movie. But on a week-to-week basis, Hannibal is something like a hybrid procedural cooking show.
A meditation on existentialism.
It's almost it's a psychiatry show almost, or a psychology. It's a therapy show, more than a killer show. The Strain looks like a straight up horror movie, and like when American Horror Story came out, it's like, oh, here we go, a scary show, and then it's just like a nonsense festival.
Right.
And all these shows that are promised to be scary, like Rosemary's Baby on NBC, which was just boring and a disaster. And
did that come out?
Yeah, that came and went so fast that nobody even knew it.
Oh, I thought it was coming out next season. Okay.
No, that's the sad reality. But no, everything that is promised to be a good horror show has disappointed. And I would, of course, say The Walking Dead has as well, although commercially it's obviously a juggernaut. I think that in terms of converting a good horror movie to the TV screen, it has failed in almost every regard. And so this is our next swing. Step into the plate and give it another go.
Well, let it be on the record that it was over one of our totally on the record, not on the record conversations on the phone where I did convince you to watch The Strain. And I think that I did convince you that it was going to be actually horrific. But what was it about? We'll talk about that in a moment. With the trailers itself and the other information that you've gathered, what was it about about this show that made you believe that this might be it?
Based on everything I've read from critics so far, and no one's really published a review yet of the pilot, although I'm sure those will be out by the time this episode actually premieres. But I'm convinced now that this is an adult show. This is a show for adults. It's not for teenagers. You know, it's not the vampire show for teenagers like True Blood. Sorry. It's not.
I think that's for your early 20-somethings is what True Blood. That's the demo for True Blood. I think your teenagers is the Vampire Diaries.
Well, True Blood has been on for, what, 6 seasons now? So 7. So it started as a teenager show, and then the people who watched it as teenagers are now in their early 20s. But it's a show for teenagers.
Okay.
But
I doubt HBO would agree with that, but we can continue.
Well,
this is not about True Blood. This is not about True Blood.
No, but it helps to understand the strain, to put it in the context, because it really is. If you look at the landscape of scary TV, it's pretty dismal. It's nonsense like True Blood or American Horror Story, or it's sort of faux prestige like The Walking Dead, where if you aren't maybe if you're not aware of sort of the broader context of TV, that show might trick you into thinking it's really good. But it's really just boring, and it's basically people doing chores while the zombie apocalypse goes on. So I want again, like it's almost like The White Whale, you know, like a really scary TV show that sustains it. And so this, you know, the way you described it to me, the idea of de-romanticizing vampires is something that immediately appeals to me.
Yes.
Like right off the bat, it seems like that is a great premise for a scary TV show.
Yes, my description of this show is that, in my mind, I'm a vampire superfan. I am completely literate in Buffy and Angel and can take tests on it and probably score 100%. Interview with a Vampire. I know. Interview with a Vampire. I tried the Vampire Diaries, couldn't do it. True Blood. Just in general, or you know, the Lost Boys. I could go on and on and on. I'm a vampire superfan. So when I first read the book series for The Strain, I was going to it just because I love vampires. Let it be known, though, I'm not talking about Twilight because those are not vampires. Anyway.
Wow. So wait, so is this podcast just going to be me attacking The Walking Dead and you attacking Twilight? Is that how this is going to work?
I think that's where we're at right
That's
now.
where we're at. Okay, good.
Okay, good.
It's trying to make everyone unhappy in the audience.
Right. But so I came to The Strain for 2 reasons. One is because I like vampires. Well, I guess 3 reasons. 2 is because Guillermo del Toro is my favorite director of all time. Yeah. Pan's Labyrinth is my favorite film of all time, and I love almost all of his other work. And 3, I love horror. I love horror movies. I love horror TV shows, even though, you know, they are few and far between, at least successful ones. So when I came to The Strain, I came at it thinking, oh, vampires, I know how people usually treat vampires. Guillermo del Toro successfully took multiple myths of vampires from Europe and also from Asia, and sort of combined them and made horrific creatures that are not sexy in any way, shape, or form. And that, to me, like when you go back into the history of the vampire, that's what's fascinating about the vampire, is that it is supposed to be a horror creature. It only became sexy in the late 1800s when Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. Before that, it was a monster, and it kept people in their homes at night. And so that's what The Strain is going to do, and I'm very excited about it. Well, at least that's what the book did.
Yeah, that's what The Strain promises. That yes. Justin Timberlake brought the sexy back. The Strain taking the sexy away. Yes.
Oh boy. That should be our first tweet.
I think you should tweet that right now. But no, I mean that's it, and that's like, as a log line, as far as log lines go, that's about as good as it gets. Like I instantly get what they're trying to do. And by the way, I picked on The Walking Dead. I should also mention Penny Dreadful, which I'll avoid making any dreadful puns. But after the pilot, that show became as boring as The Walking Dead, basically, and it just I think misunderstood what works about it, what worked about that pilot. And it only had to do 8 episodes, Penny Dreadful. Anyway, but the point is, horror is in a bad place right now, and this has a great premise, a great in Guillermo del Toro, a great sort of person guiding the ship. I mean, you couldn't really ask for anyone better.
Well, and it has a story that's already been written that is already scary.
Yes.
So, I will be the first to say, I believe it was chapter 12 that I literally could not sleep for 3 nights after reading chapter 12. It is horrific.
Yeah.
Good. And that's of the first, right? That's of the first book alone.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine if this series is successful, like where it will even go, because it gets scarier and scarier. Of course, it loses itself in some places, but what book or what story doesn't occasionally?
Yeah.
But I know that the setup for the strain and what I anticipate from the pilot is probably going to leave me having nightmares.
Good.
Just because visualizing it in your head, some book readers say they prefer to, or some people who read books and then watch movies say that they prefer to imagine it in their head. They think it's that much more scary. I don't. I would rather see somebody with the master, with their own craft, be able to interpret it
now,
and play it out.
Having said that, we just went through this with Game of Thrones, where a lot of fans get mad when things on screen don't conform to the image that they had in their heads. So how tolerant are you going to be of either plot changes or just detail changes, whether it's visual or whatever, from the book? Are you going to go in with an open mind, or are you going to be thinking, like, if this doesn't match my experience with the book, I'm going to be angry?
No, see, that's the other thing. I always go in with the mindset that you can't translate one thing from one media to the next. I know that some Harry Potter fans don't agree with this this mindset, and many Game of Thrones fans don't agree with this mindset. But even in the case of True Blood, which are books that I read when I was a teenager, and then they became a TV show when I was 18, even in that case, up until a certain point, I was totally fine with them taking their own liberties. Now that show's gone off the rails on the crazy train, and that's kind of weird. But they took the elements that I recognized from the books, and I was able to go, oh, I have a small insight into that. I have a small inside look into that, but I don't have all of the knowledge. And I'm hoping that the strain takes some liberties, because there's definitely some places where it could be a little more streamlined from in the books, because obviously you have so much more time to deal with characters and deal with conspiracies and things of that nature within a book than you will within a TV show. Yeah,
TV show is definitely going to have to cut things and condense things and reorder things just for the practical nature of the medium. So that sounds like you've got the right mindset going in as a book reader.
Yeah, the only thing, there's like a couple things that I thought were kind of funny, like the casting. I was just on the phone with you, actually. The casting of Vasily, I think is how you pronounce his name. And he's like a very sexy man, and that's a character who's supposed to be kind of not. So like, there's going to be some of those TV things where the characters aren't going to look the way that I thought they did. Even the casting of Corey Stoll, who I love from his performance in House of Cards, he wouldn't be like, I wouldn't cast him as a Frame Goodweather based on how he looks, but based on his performance in House of Cards, I would totally cast him as a Frame Goodweather.
He's not a movie star looking guy. I mean, he's not. I'm not saying no shots fired at Corey Stoll's looks, but he's not like what you would, he's not like the chiseled jaw action hero Brad Pitt kind. He is someone who has a sort of specific look to him. Again, if you've seen him on House of Cards in the first season, I mean, he's not Kevin Spacey. He's not a guy who looks like a movie star,
Right.
But that was, I think, when you told me about the show and I was interested in it, that was when I really committed to it, when I looked up that he was starring in it, because that's a great sign. I mean, not only is he the best part to date of House of Cards, and what increasingly one of the only good parts now that the show has gone forward. He is someone who's a real actor. He's not a Twilight kind of early 20s pinup model kind of guy.
He's dedicated to his craft.
He's a real actor. I will say, from the early screenshots, he is wearing a ludicrous wig in this show, which is a little distracting, but I guess I can let that slide. But he's got very distinctive hair, and we know he's a bald man, and it's very clearly a wig. But so that's going to take a little bit of getting used to. But I think I can move on.
That's funny.
I think I can move past it. But yeah, either way, I'm really excited to see him get his own show, and a show that is so hyped and getting so much support from the network, and that people seem to be excited about. And on that subject, I wanted to bring up, in sort of the broader context of TV, this is a huge swing by FX. FX is putting a lot of eggs into this basket. It's their first Sunday night show, so it's their first attempt to compete with the Mad Men's and Breaking Bads of the world, to launch themselves into that stratosphere.
Yes.
It's being hailed as the Walking Dead killer, another thing that I like.
Which I'm all in for that.
Oh, me too. But this is the show that's designed to kill the Walking Dead, and I don't think anyone associated with the show is really refuting that. I'm sure they wouldn't go out and say that themselves, but that's what this is. This is a show designed to compete with the Walking Dead because it thinks it can do horror better than the Walking Dead can. And so, yeah.
I think that it can too.
Me too. I'm really hopeful. I'm really rooting for it. Which is why we want to chronicle it in our podcast, because if it succeeds at that goal, then hopefully it will have the commercial success of The Walking Dead. And if it fails, it's going to be fascinating why it fails.
Yes.
What about the show do you think could fail? How could this go wrong?
Well, much like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the pilot is directed by Guillermo del Toro. The pilot of The Strain is directed by Guillermo del Toro, much like in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the pilot was directed by Joss Whedon. So you're setting an expectation really, really high. You're setting a bar really, really high that may not have the follow-through of later directors and writers. So I think that is certainly a possibility, just that the pilot will be exceptionally good and set the bar too high. Yeah. And what else I think could go wrong, and I'm trying to come at this without spoilers.
Yes. Not specific plot points, because I don't think the majority of this audience is going to have read the books. I don't think this is going to be Game of Thrones.
Okay. I don't think the majority of the audience for Game of Thrones has read the books, but
but a very high percentage of vocal people.
Yes, that's true. Many vocal people.
Yes.
But I think that this is, and it may not be totally clear, that this is an apocalypse story. This is the end of the world. That's what this show is about, and I think that there is a lot of room for error in that, in the way that the world functions, in how quickly organizations are dispensed, in how quickly humans turn on one another. I think that this show could fail in its inability to capture human nature in a horrific environment. That being said, because The Walking Dead failed at that utterly. Yeah. By episode 4 of The Walking Dead, they had completely failed at capturing what I think is a real representation of the world falling apart. But the first 3 episodes of The Walking Dead were phenomenal. And then it just became kind of interpersonal chaos. And I don't think... and what I know about The Strain is that it shouldn't do that based on the books, but that doesn't mean that TV executives everywhere aren't trying to make that happen anyway.
Right. And I think your assessment of The Walking Dead is right. And the underlying reason for that is that TV is designed to be to go on for an indefinite amount of time. That the profitability of TV is such that you want to leave things open and not chew through material too quickly, and string things out as long as possible. And I mean, The Walking Dead doing 20+ episode seasons is absolutely ridiculous, and I think is responsible for more problems on that show than any single other factor. This is a 13 episode season of The Strain, which is not a ton. I mean, it's not 20, but it's still a substantial episode order. It's not like Fargo, where it's like 8, I think. Or I think Fargo was 10, but like Penny Dreadful was 8 and couldn't even get through 8 without being boring. And so I think that the biggest hurdle for The Strain is making itself interesting for a 13 episode season and not having that mid-season lag where they're kind of in a holding pattern. You know, they're kind of saving some events for the end of the season and just need to get through some episodes. We see that a lot. We see that even with a great show like Game of Thrones, where it doesn't really want to burn through any material, so it sort of just stagnates for 2 or 3 episodes and then picks back up. And with a horror show specifically, and a show that's being billed as a scary show, I don't know if the audience is going to have patience for that. That, you know, to have like 2 or 3 episodes where it's just jump scares, you know, like nothing that's like good horror. It's just, you know, like, boo. You know, that's I want to see the show be able to maintain its storytelling and sort of be a coherent season and not devolve into The Walking Dead, which is just a bunch of like quests, basically. Like, let's go on these quests for a few episodes to kill some time.
Well, I do know that one thing I will say about the books is I thought that the middle of the books of each book was the most interesting part, which I guess is probably what it should be in some respects. But the middles were always the most exhilarating, the most things happened. It was always the ends of the books that, up until the final one, were clearly leading up until the sequel. And always, I know that the second book in particular, I felt sort of ended at sort of a moot point, like it wasn't totally interesting to me. So I think if it follows the books pretty closely, and that's if it goes the more Game of Thrones route for a little while, then the danger might actually be in the finale. That being said, again, you're transferring it from one media to the next, and there's FX is pretty good with its audience and it's pretty good at finales.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
So maybe it'll get that oomph.
That's a big thing. This is on FX, and FX has a very good track record, right up until Tyrant. But that's a different story. We'll just say we'll give him a mulligan for Tyrant. That's an anomaly. That's off on its own island. In the Middle East in the desert. But yeah.
With a white guy lead.
Yeah. Yes. Oh God. Don't get me started on Tyrant. Tyrant is terrible. But this isn't Tyrant, and FX in the last few years has had the best track record of any of the networks. I think it goes without saying that FX has been the most successful cable network, not from an audience perspective, but from a creative perspective. Yeah. The last few years, with shows like The Americans and Justified still being good, and just you go down the list, and FX has a very high batting average. And so the fact that this is on FX and not AMC makes me very excited for it. And so that's maybe the reason I'm most excited, that it's not an AMC show where I would just have my guard way up. Right. But yeah, we're going to be podcasting about it every week here.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. Yeah. And I guess next week, after the pilot, which is called Night Zero, we are going to bring you our thoughts on episode 1. Do you... Night Zero, which is, I believe, actually what it's called. The first chapter is called in the book, too. Okay. So is there anything else that you would like to mention to the audience? Like where you can be found? Will you be live tweeting? Anything like that?
I'll probably be live tweeting it at Kyle Loves TV on Twitter. I will most likely be doing that, and you can follow my other TV live tweets there. And of course, Blair and I both are the editors of showratings.tv, which is a website where you can share your own thoughts. So if you violently disagree with anything we've said here or say in future podcasts, please write your own thoughts on the episode page for the episodes. So yeah,
you can find us there. And I will be live tweeting it. I know I will put the disclaimer out there right now that I am the writer I'm covering the critic for True Blood this season.
You are.
So
my condolences.
Thank you. I'm true to the end, no matter how bad it gets. So hashtag true to the end. So I will be live tweeting the strain to the best of my ability, and I will be as timely as possible. But once True Blood comes to its close, halfway through this season of the strain, then I will be all in, all 100% in. It will be all that I'll be talking about.
Hashtag all in.
Hashtag all in the strain. You can follow me at Blair Loves TV. You can also follow our Show Ratings website at Show Ratings TV. So this wraps up our introductory episode of the Strain podcast. Before we go, I want to mention a few things. You can download and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can also hear all of our shows at our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Please subscribe to the show and also rate us. Speaking of rating, please go to showratings.tv and rate and review all of your favorite TV shows. Again, you can follow Kyle and I at Blair Loves TV, BLAIRE, and at Kyle Loves TV. And you can follow this podcast's Twitter feed at The Strain Pod. Check out our website, showratings.tv, and rate and review The Strain every week after it comes out, as well as all of your other shows. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week after the pilot airs.
If you would like to donate to help pay for this and other Southgate Media Group podcasts, simply go to our website, southgatemediagroup.com, and click on the donate button. It can be as little as $1 or, well, as much as you want. Help keep this fun going by supporting this and our other shows. Thanks again for listening, everyone. You're the best fans in the world.